Luffy, the future pirate king, has sailed the seas alongside his crew, facing countless adventures together. But what if a tragic event wiped out the Straw Hats, pushing him into grief, rage, and ultimately darkness? Sabaody was a pretty active hub of pirates and slave traders that had been meant to be the gateway to the New World for the crew. During this time, numerous other pirate crews came to the island to pass through it. It was supposed to be a simple island visit, but it would soon become a walk through hell. The Celestial Dragon's arrogance had drawn Luffy's fury, and in a single punch, he shattered the fragile illusion of peace on the archipelago. Admiral Kizaru descended upon them, his speed and light-based attacks proving too overwhelming. Pacifistas flooded the battlefield, mechanical monstrosities tearing through the island, and then Kuma appeared. Unlike before this time, Kuma seemed much more lifeless. It was as if he'd become a killing machine. One by one, he systematically eradicated the Straw Hats. Zoro, still wounded from his sacrifice at Thriller Bark, barely had time to react before he was sent flying. Sanji followed, his cries lost to the wind. Usopp, Nami, Chopper, Robin, Frankie, and Brook, each friend vanished before Luffy's eyes. Their desperate attempts to fight back meaningless against Kuma's overwhelming power. Luffy fought with everything he had, pushing himself past exhaustion, but he too was struck. The last thing he saw before darkness consumed him was Kuma's impassive gaze and Sabaody burning in the distance. When Luffy awoke, he was on Amazon Lily. While on the island, Luffy trained in the jungle, gradually regaining his strength. But deep inside, he was confused about his crew's fate. Before he could dwell on it, he received news that Ace had been captured and was sentenced to execution. With Hancock's help, Luffy infiltrated a marine ship and set sail for Impel Down, determined to save his brother. He infiltrated the underwater prison. By the time he reached level 6, Ace was gone, having been transferred to Marineford for execution. There was no time to rest. With a stolen ship and a ragtag crew of escapees, Luffy set sail for the greatest battlefield in the world. Marineford itself was like a nightmare. For a moment, there was hope as Luffy had freed Ace from his shackles. The brothers had fought side by side, tearing a path through the Marines. But then Sakazuki proved to be too much for the two brothers. His magma fist had come down as Ace moved to protect Luffy. And then, Luffy saw his brother standing in front of him with a fist through his chest. Luffy's voice was the last thing Ace heard, calling his name before life faded from his body. His brother died in his arms, and all he could do was scream until his throat gave out. He woke up days later on Amazon Lily. His body had been healed again by Rayleigh and the Kuja warriors, but his soul was in pieces. He had lost Ace. He had lost everything. And to top it all off, Luffy would receive the news about his crew. Kuma had been ruthless. The crew hadn't survived the places they had been sent to. Nami had been executed after being captured on a sky island controlled by the world government. Zoro, already wounded from Thriller Bark, hadn't been seen in any of the nearby islands. No one seemed to have seen him anywhere, so it could only be assumed that his wounds got the best of him. Usopp had died alone, trying to escape an island filled with monstrous insects. Chopper had been hunted down as a rare beast. Frankie had been disassembled, his body parts sold for scrap. Robin had also disappeared without any clue as to where she was. Brook had perished in fire, his soul never returning. Even Sanji was nowhere to be found. One by one, Luffy realized that they must have died, scattered and alone. His crew, his family. Luffy didn't cry though, as there were no tears left in him. Just a massive void that filled his soul. Days turned to weeks as he moved around with no will to live, only eating when he was forced to. He stared at the sea for hours, as if he was expecting a ship carrying his friends to arrive, but none did. They were truly gone. Rayleigh tried to ease Luffy's pain by offering to train him to distract him from his grief. Luffy accepted, but the light in his eyes had vanished. His punches were heavier, his movements sharp, but they lacked the joy, the wild freedom that had once defined him. He fought not out of love for adventure, but because he had nothing else. Every night was filled with nightmares, with Luffy seeing Ace and his crew dying over and over again. A part of him wanted to die, but another part wanted something else. The world government had taken his crew and his brothers from him. He trained harder as this thought began to erode him like rot. He pushed himself beyond his limits, mastering his haki until his enemies would break before him. His old self began to wither away as it was replaced by something much colder. He started speaking less to Rayleigh. His laughter vanished entirely. One night, as he stood at the cliffside overlooking the sea, the wind howling around him, a realization took hold of him. He had been playing by the world's rules for too long. The Marines, the Celestial Dragons, the corrupt kings, they decided who lived and who died. They had power. He had been foolish to ever think he could challenge them with just his dream. Dreams were useless. Strength was all that mattered. He would become a force so unstoppable that no one would ever be able to take anything from him again. He would ensure that the world knew pain, just as he did. Rayleigh saw all of this happening in front of his eyes. He had seen loads of pirates throughout his life, but he had never seen one who had fallen so far. At first, he tried to guide Luffy back, hoping the fire of his old spirit could be reignited. But 2 years passed, and even Rayleigh could no longer continue training Luffy. His student had gone too far, sinking deeper into a pit of darkness that no words could pull him from. One day, without warning, Luffy left, sailing alone into the vast ocean to bring ruin to the world. Luffy traveled across the seas all alone, hitting marine bases one after another. He completely decimated any stronghold he stumbled upon and any marine ship he saw. Each battle pushed him further, his massive mastery of haki growing, his body adapting to new levels of brutality. Strong Marines fell before him. Vice admirals who once thought themselves untouchable were broken under his fists, and the bounty on his head began to skyrocket. Then suddenly the world shifted again. The warlord system the Marines had maintained for so long was abolished, and that sent chaos through the sea. With the warlords no longer protected, the balance of power was disrupted. As such, even Dracula Mihawk was targeted by the Marines. Annoyed with the constant pursuit, a new force on the seas emerged. The Cross Guild. The organization, led by Buggy, Crocodile, and Mihawk, turned the tables on the Marines by placing bounties on their heads, turning them into the hunted instead of the hunters. Luffy saw an opportunity when he heard of this. The Cross Guild was exactly the kind of place where he could get revenge after learning of all the important Marines there were. When he arrived at the Cross Guild's headquarters, no introductions were needed. The moment Crocodile laid eyes on him, he understood what Luffy had become. There was no trace of the reckless but kind-hearted boy who once challenged the world for his friends. This Luffy was cold, calculating, and merciless. He did not seek alliances or comrades. He sought tools and weapons to be used in his growing war. It wasn't long before Luffy's reputation within the guild grew. He started hunting Marines, not just for the bounties, but for the sheer pleasure of breaking the very system that had taken everything from him. His first major kill was a vice admiral, then a second, then a third. The world took notice. But Luffy wasn't just going on a killing spree. He needed a bigger empire and more resources. He found the perfect target when he learned of Don Quixote do Flamingo. Luffy set his sights on Dressrosa to take over Doflamingo's empire and to take control over the criminal network he had. He did not come to liberate Dressrosa, he came to conquer it. Doflamingo, arrogant as ever, laughed when he heard the news. He had seen the boy before and had once considered him an upstart. But this was not the same Luffy. The battle was unlike any before. Doflamingo wielded his awakened devil fruit with terrifying skill, but Luffy's rage knew no bounds. Their haki shook the heavens, splitting the very land beneath them. The people of Dressrosa cowered in fear, caught in the storm of two monsters clashing. In the end, Doflamingo faltered through the power of Luffy's haki and Gear 4. Luffy did not just defeat him though, he executed him. Luffy stood atop the ruins of Dressrosa, his shadow stretching long beneath a blood-red sky. The lifeless body of Doflamingo lay beneath his feet, the once feared heavenly demon, now reduced to nothing more than a corpse. Luffy's fist, still coated in hardened haki, dripped with fresh blood. His expression remained unreadable, void of emotion, as if he had lost the ability to feel mercy. From a nearby rooftop, Sabo watched in horror. He had arrived too late. He had fought alongside the people of Dressrosa, hoping to liberate them from tyranny, but what he had witnessed was not liberation. He gritted his teeth as he clutched the Mera Mera no Mi, the fruit that once belonged to Ace. He had intended to reunite with his brother, to tell him the truth about the Revolutionary Army's movements, but the man standing before him now was not the Luffy he knew. Luffy turned slightly, as if he sensed a familiar presence. His conqueror's haki flickered momentarily, a pulse of suffocating darkness, but he did not search for the source. He didn't care. He simply turned away, walking through the wreckage, his coat swaying with every step. Sabo did not approach. Instead, he clenched his fists, knowing that whatever remained of his younger brother had to be retrieved, but that he couldn't do it alone. So Sabo went to search for the people that were closest to Luffy. His hunger for power grew insatiable. Luffy wanted more strength, more soldiers, more destruction. It was then that he received news that Bartholomew Kuma had been taken to Mary Juaz as a mindless slave for the Celestial Dragons. Luffy's heart burned at the thought, and he wanted Kuma buried instead of enslaved. But before attacking the Holy Land, Luffy would need an army and would need to lessen the opposing forces. So came his greatest challenge, the Admirals. The first admiral Luffy took on was Fujitora. The man had been after him since the events of Dressrosa, and Luffy finally let himself be cornered at a marine base that he had previously destroyed. The sky was thick with smoke, the ground shattered from previous clashes, and the air carried the scent of burning debris and blood. The civilians had long since fled, leaving behind only Marines, desperate to hold their ground against the nightmare that had come for them. Amidst the destruction, Luffy stood while his coat billowed in the wind. Fujitora approached slowly, with his sword lightly tapping against the ground. He was a man of unwavering justice, yet even he felt sadness for Luffy, knowing that he had lost his friends and family. The Admiral exhaled slowly, gripping his blade. The ground trembled as his presence alone distorted the very atmosphere. Then, massive boulders, torn from the heavens themselves, came crashing down upon Luffy, drawn by Fujitora's overwhelming gravitational force. The weight of an entire island's worth of rubble sought to bury him beneath an unrelenting storm. The force alone would have crushed armies. But Luffy did not move as the meteors came crashing down. He lifted a single haki-infused fist and broke through the rocks with his armament haki in a devastating punch. The impact sent a shockwave so powerful it obliterated the incoming meteors, sending fragments of burning rock flying in every direction. Then Luffy closed the distance in a flash. His conqueror's haki-infused kick aimed straight for Fujitora's side. The Admiral barely had time to react, raising his blade just in time to block. The impact split the ground beneath him, sending violent tremors across the battlefield. Fujitora gritted his teeth. This level of raw power was unnatural. The battle continued with the two exchanging blows, but Luffy seemed to be a monster. He kept lunging at the Admiral, and Fujitora would soon find himself on the defensive. And then, with Conqueror's haki infused in his fist, Fujitora was sent flying and crashing through layers of of broken debris before finally slamming into the remains of a warship. His sword fell from his grip. His breath was ragged. His body broken. Luffy had defeated the Admiral. After getting rid of his pursuer, Luffy aimed to expand the Cross Guild and create a larger force. To do that, he was going to ravage Wano, the territory of an emperor. The land of the samurai had remained untouched by the world government for centuries, ruled by the monstrous Emperor Kaido. He came only for Kaido's throne. The battle between Luffy and Kaido was a battle of epic proportions. The strongest creature in the world against a pirate that was taking the world by storm. Kaido welcomed the challenge and was pushing Luffy to his limits before his anger finally surged. Suddenly, an ominous beating of drums was heard across the battlefield as the Cross Guild fought against the Beast Pirates. Luffy's hair stood on end and turned black and red as his aura gained a dark and sinister vibe. This Gear 5th was not one of joy but madness. Luffy's body stretched and shifted, but there was no playfulness in his movements, no laughter. His form pulsed with Conqueror's haki, but it was no longer the pure force of an undying will. It was something twisted, oppressive, suffocating. Every one of Luffy's strikes hit Kaido with an unbearable force and broke through his hardened skin. The sky around them went dark, and for the first time, the strongest creature felt fear. In the final clash, Luffy coated his fist in a swirling mass of darkness and descended like an executioner's blade. The skies split apart, the land trembled, and Kaido fell. His lifeless body crashed into the ruins of Onigashima. The once feared Emperor of the Sea lay in a pool of his blood, his reign of terror ending by another tyrant's hand. Luffy merely turned to the remnants of the Beast Pirates, his voice a low growl as he commanded them to serve him or die. Most submitted instantly. Those who resisted were erased. With Wano under his control and his forces growing with each victory, Luffy set his sights on the new Marine headquarters. He did not care for the revolutionaries, nor did he care for the war between pirates and the Marines. He only aimed to get rid of anyone standing in his way. But as he sailed toward the heart of the world's greatest military force, a familiar ship appeared on the horizon, the Red Hair Pirates. Shanks stood at the bow of his ship, arms crossed, his eyes filled with something Luffy no longer recognized. For the first time in years, Shanks looked at him not with pride, but with sadness. The two faced each other on the open sea, a silence stretching between them that felt heavier than the ocean itself. And then Shanks told Luffy to stop. He told him that his path would lead to nothing but emptiness, and that it wasn't something that the former pirate king would have wanted. It wasn't something Luffy's friends would have wanted either. Luffy stared at him, his expression cold with a hint of sadness. His eyes were devoid of the admiration he once held for the man who had given him his dream. He told Shanks that his friends were no longer here, and without saying anything more, Luffy removed his straw hat. He stared at it for a moment, but his dreams were quickly overshadowed by his thirst for revenge. He tossed the hat to Shanks and told him that the next time they met would be on the battlefield. A storm brewed in Shanks' heart, but he did not move. For the first time, he saw the truth. The boy he once bet everything on, the boy he believed would one day change the world, was gone. Luffy turned his back on Shanks and sailed away without looking back. He did not need the past, and his future was going to be one he would fill with destruction. With each battle, his legend grew. With each kingdom he toppled, his influence spread. The Cross Guild had evolved from a bounty system for Marines into a full-scale empire of chaos, where the strong ruled without restraint. Under Luffy's command, it became the dominant force of the seas, swallowing up pirate crews and former warlords who either pledged allegiance or perished. Luffy soon became the true emperor of the guild. The new Marine headquarters this time was stronger than the one at Marineford. It had more pacifistas and even the Seraphim along with the admirals. But Luffy's guild was strong. He descended upon the Marine stronghold like an apocalyptic force, leading a huge army of pirates, warlords, and remnants of fallen empires. His darkened Gear 5th form towered above the battlefield. Admirals like Kizaru and Aramaki stood in his way, but their light and nature-based powers faltered before his overwhelming haki and pure destruction. Kizaru, once the fastest being alive, found himself dragged into Luffy's warping reality, his light being twisted into chains of darkness. With a single devastating blow, Luffy crushed Kizaru's skull into the earth. Aramaki tried to drown him in a forest of death, but Luffy ripped all of it from the ground up. His haki consumed every leaf, every root, every vine. The fortress was ruined beneath Luffy's fists. Marines screamed as they were swallowed by the earth itself, their stronghold becoming their tomb. And then Garp stood in front of Luffy. Garp saw in Luffy only a fleeting hint of his grandson, and he cursed himself for letting Luffy go down this path. He cursed himself for not saving Ace when he could have, and now he felt it was his obligation to stop Luffy before he could cause any further destruction. Garp stood firm, his marine coat flowing in the wind. Luffy's eyes were devoid of recognition. He only saw Garp's failures in his eyes, and with that, he shot forward to launch a massive Gomu Gomu no Beidran gun straight at Garp. The fist, infused with darkness, tore through the air like a cannon. Garp blocked it with a single palm, but the force cracked the earth beneath him. He gritted his teeth and struck back, his fist sinking deep into Luffy's gut with a thunderous impact. For a moment, Luffy coughed up blood as he felt the force of the galaxy impact, but then his warped grin returned. His body snapped back unnaturally, absorbing the impact before twisting his entire form into a spiraling, blackened storm of destruction. The battle continued as Garp took blow after blow, unable to fully commit to hurting his grandson. And then, with a monstrous roar, Luffy unleashed a final attack. His His fist became the size of a battleship, coated in a darkened, corrupted haki, ready to end the fight. Garp looked at his grandson with sorrowful eyes. He raised his fist one last time, and then the world turned white with the force of their final clash. As the dust settled, there was no victory celebration, only silence as Garp lay on the ground bleeding. The Marines had once ruled the world. Now, they were nothing but a memory, and Luffy didn't even look back. His eyes were already set on the final destination. The Celestial Dragons had thought they were at the top of the food chain, but this time, they faced their doom. Nika was no longer here as the god of liberation. He had come to end them. Luffy led the charge against the Holy Land with an entire army of pirates, former slaves, and even captured Marines. The 5 elders, monstrous and ancient, emerged to stand against him, each of them transformed into demonic yokai. But Luffy was much stronger than them now. He fought as a force of nature, the incarnation of destruction itself, and one by one, the elders fell. St. Marcus Mars, his phoenix-like form incinerated by a haki-infused fist. St. Topman Warcurry, his steel-skinned boar form shattered by a single punch that split the red line itself. St. Ethan Baron Nushiro, his cursed blade torn from his grasp before he was broken like an old relic. St. Shepherd Jew Peter, his monstrous sandworm body crushed into nothingness. St. Jaigarsha Saturn, his Ushi Oni form trampled beneath Luffy's boundless fury. At the heart of Mary Jawaz, Imu the Eternal Ruler stood alone. Imu had existed for centuries unseen and untouched, manipulating history to prevent the rise of the legend of Nika. But they had failed. Nika, the one the world government feared most, the one they had tried to erase from history, had transcended everything they had built. The battle between Luffy and Imu reshaped the world itself. And in the final clash, Luffy's fist, coated in the haki of his darkened Gear 5th, came down upon the throne of the world. The last great secret of the Void Century ended with a single blow. The world government was no more. The Marines were buried beneath their fortress. The Celestial Dragons had been erased from existence. And Luffy, the man who had once dreamed of freedom, had become the very thing they feared most. Nika, the god of destruction. And upon the shattered ruins of Mary Jawaz, Luffy sat on the empty throne, his once burning ambition now reduced to embers. His revenge was over. And then they arrived. Shanks, the last great legend of the old world, stepped onto the battlefield with Sabo, Dragon, and the revolutionaries. And beside them stood Zoro. Scarred, hardened, and unbroken, Zoro had survived where no one else had. Kuma had sent Zoro to Elbaf to die, but he had fought, bled, and endured, clawing his way through the brutal underworld of the giants. He had gained their respect, earning Loki's trust and standing among the strongest warriors in history. And now, he had come for Luffy to fulfill his promise to his captain. Zoro unsheathed his swords. Shanks grasped Gryphon, his crimson cloak billowing in the wind. Sabo clenched his staff as flames surrounded him, while Dragon took to the skies, surrounded by his wind. They would end this tyranny. Luffy rose from the throne, his body crackling with dark haki, his corrupted Gear 5th distorting reality itself. Zoro already knew that Luffy had gone beyond redemption, and he cursed himself for not coming for his captain sooner. But he wouldn't let Luffy continue his tyranny. The battle began with a single swing of Luffy's fist. The air rippled, space itself bending under the sheer force of his attack. Shanks intercepted, his blade clashing against Luffy's knuckles, the impact sending shockwaves across the red line. Zoro struck next, his swords coated in blackened haki, sharper than ever before. He aimed straight for Luffy's heart, but Luffy's body twisted unnaturally, dodging in ways no normal being should. Sabo leaped at him alongside Dragon as they tore through the sky while going for their family member. They hit Luffy's side and sent him crashing through the ruins of the Holy Land. But Luffy emerged from the rubble grinning, his teeth razor sharp, his eyes hollow. With a flick of his wrist, the battlefield turned into chaos. The sky cracked, the sea roared, gravity itself reversed, pulling the fighters into a vortex of destruction. Zoro planted his feet into the crumbling earth. His muscles screamed, his swords hummed with a power he had never reached before. And then he used his Ashura to split the skies and twist through the fabric of Luffy's reality. Shanks rushed forward, his blade glowing with the full force of his conqueror's haki. The four continued fighting Luffy with support from the giants, and eventually, the already tired Luffy began to stagger. His form flickered, the monstrous power within him finally faltering. Luffy collapsed to his knees, his breath ragged. The power of Nika, the haki of his corrupted Gear 5th, all of it began to fade. For the first time in years, Luffy's eyes cleared up as he looked up at his friend, his mentor, and his family. A tear fell from his face as he smiled, a real, genuine smile as he told them to end his suffering. A pain was felt through everyone's hearts, and Zoro was the first to leap. Tears filled his eyes as he used his final burst of Conqueror's haki to pierce through his captain's heart. Luffy landed against Zoro, his Gear 5th fading. Zoro clenched his fists. His blades trembled. Shanks lowered his head. Dragon looked toward the ground, and Sabo clenched his brother and cried deeply. Luffy looked up at the sky one last time as the sun began to set. His journey was finally over. The sun was setting, and with that, Monkey D. Luffy, the god of destruction, was no more. Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button for more One Piece videos.